This is Fothentic History.
Hello, welcome to the podcast. I'm Brian Young.
And I'm Holly Fry.
So, Holly, we're going to talk today about a galactic hero that I think never gets his due, and that's Beta Ray Bill. How do you feel about Bill?
I think that sounds great to me. He does not get enough attention.
So before we get into understanding what brought Bill into becoming a hero, we need to know a few other things first.
To start, we have to know some things about Surtur. And Surtur was a powerful and fiery demon who was a native of the extra-dimensional plane Muspelheim, which is one of the 9 worlds of Asgard. He was not Asgardian, however, but an elemental force of evil feared by the Asgardians. He was more than 1,000 feet tall and made of flames. And we aren't sure quite how old he was, but we do know that he was an ancient being that was even older than Odin himself. As an ancient elemental force of Asgard, he was imbued with vast destructive powers. For the most part, however, he was imprisoned by Odin and his brothers in the molten center of the Earth's core. And this cost Odin's brothers their lives, and it was the event that actually gave Odin his power.
Over the years, he would find himself free now and again. Once Loki set him loose to terrorize Earth, but Odin, Thor Odinson, and Balder the Brave stood against him and re-imprisoned him. Another time he was set free by cultists, but the heroes of Midgard, the Avengers, as well as the Black Knight and the Sorcerer Supreme, were able to fight him back and lock him back into his sleep. But the third time he was set loose, he wreaked havoc across the galaxy with his newly forged sword Twilight. And we'll get more into that in part 2, because this is going to be a 2-part episode. So we're going to talk about Bill, and then we're going to talk about Bill's relationship with re-imprisoning possibly Surtur in part 2.
As a means to probe for possible avenues of escape, Surtur sent his fire demons to destroy the peaceful Corbinite Empire, which was located at the Burning Galaxy. And through trials of combat, the remaining Corbinites chose a hero to protect their Ark fleet and their species, and to head up their ship, the Scuttlebutt, as they sought a new homeworld away from the destruction of Surtur. And to this end, Beta Ray Bill was chosen. As the hero of the Corbinites, they remade him cybernetically into an imposing and dominating figure, muscular but with the snout of a horse-like creature with an evil glare. He was bioengineered to resemble the most ferocious carnivore known to the Corbinites.
During the trip to what would hopefully become New Corbin, Beta Ray Bill was kept aboard that lead ship, Scuttlebutt, in a state of suspended animation. This ship was the protector of the entire fleet that whisked the Corbinite people across the galaxy, and they too were in states of suspended animation. And Surtur's demons attacked the fleeing fleet once more, and Bill fought them with all his might as the fleet escaped. And once that threat was diminished, he went ahead to scout for a new world for his people.
And this is where the story actually gets much more interesting. The Scuttlebutt was a ship unknown to Earth, and it was barreling by at incredible speed, so from the appearance of Earth, the destruction of their empire looked as though it could have been caused by the ship, rather than the survivors fleeing. Nick Fury, the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., perceived this as a potential threat to Earth, and he sought the help of a member of the Avengers that he thought would be able to deal with what could have very well been an invading force.
Naturally, he called Thor Odinson. As a god and Asgardian, intergalactic threats were something he could definitely handle. And when Thor arrived to the surface of the Scuttlebutt, the ship determined that Thor was a potential threat. It blasted him with its external cannons until the Thunder God smashed in through the hole to look around. And that's when the automatic defense procedures for the ship awoke Bill from his state of suspended animation and goaded him into attacking the intruder.
Thor did not ask too many questions, and he was not accustomed to fighting enemies so strong. In fact, he commented, quote, "What manner of being is this who so cavalierly tosses the god of thunder about like a bale of new-mown hay?" And at this point, Beta Ray Bill took Thor for one of Surtur's demons and chided him to rise up in battle so that he could kill him.
Thor used his mighty hammer Mjolnir to attack the champion of the Corbinites pretty instantly. And this fight went on for a while inside the ship, and Thor was surprised by how well Bill had been able to defend against his power. And they fought viciously, trading physical and verbal barbs, and Thor thought the best course of action was to actually destroy Scuttlebutt from the inside with their fight. Scuttlebutt took enough damage that it went into an emergency landing procedure, which brought it crashing down to Earth, which was the only habitable planet nearby.
During the fight, Bill had separated Thor from his hammer, Mjolnir, and when the Scuttlebutt entered into Earth's orbit, something happened to Thor that was completely unexpected. Now that he was back on what Asgardians called Midgard, he transformed back into his human guise of Donald Blake, and Bill knocked him out pretty quickly. And he sought Thor's hammer, knowing that it would help him in his mercy mission.
To understand exactly what happened in this next part, one will have to understand the enchantment on Thor's hammer. Upon the powerful Uru hammer is an inscription that reads, "Whosoever holds this hammer, if he be worthy, shall possess the power of Thor." And at this time, Thor, for punishment long ago, had been transformed into the mortal guise of the Dr. Donald Blake. And if, while wielding the power of Thor, he went for too long without being in possession of Mjolnir, he would revert back into this mortal shape.
Yeah, in the previous years, Thor had proven to Odin that he was sort of an arrogant jerk, so in order to teach him a lesson, Odin transformed him into a mortal, hoping that his time among mortals would allow him to realize the error of his ways and to become a stronger leader. And it's the sort of lesson in humility that a godly king would definitely want to teach the son that he would be passing their rule off to. So for many years, Donald Blake was the life that Thor lived.
So back to the battle between Thor and Beta Ray Bill. Thor had transformed back into Donald Blake, and Bill sought Mjolnir. He only found, though, Donald Blake's walking stick rather than the hammer, because the hammer actually went through a transformation as well when Thor was in his mortal guise. So Bill picked up the stick and hit it against the ground sort of in anger, and then found himself transformed. Somehow the hammer, in the guise of the stick, judged him worthy of the power of Thor, and with a crack of lightning, Bill became a cybernetic Corbinite version of Thor with his helmet and costume and everything.
And it was then that an emergency on Asgard caused Odin to call Thor back to his home realm. But Odin sought only the power of Thor, and so he ended up transporting Beta Ray Bill to Asgard in the blink of an eye, leaving a staggering Donald Blake shouting at the sky, asking his father why he had been forsaken.
Yeah, that must have been rough for Thor.
Whoops!
Like, here's this creature who's attacked me, he's taken my hammer, and now my dad has got him.
Yeah, that seems like a procedural design flaw in the whole system.
Yeah. So Bill was pretty shocked to find himself in Asgard. People mistook him for Thor from behind, but he started killing Asgardians who were beyond surprised. He thought that these were demons of Surtur as well. No Asgardian other than Thor had ever been worthy enough to pick up the hammer, so who was this horse-faced looking guy dressed like Thor, smashing Asgardians like they were nothing?
Needless to say, Odin was very upset by this. He wanted to know who Bill was and where Thor had gone, and he wanted to know as quickly as possible. Thinking Odin was a demon of Surtur's make as well, he attacked Odin with Mjolnir. The Allfather was able to resist this attack and command the hammer to return to its maker. And when he repeated his questions, Bill answered only that he didn't know Thor, but that he took the hammer from the previous owner fairly in combat.
Odin sensed that this was the truth, as troubling as that was. So Odin imprisoned Bill until he was able to find Thor and bring him back to Asgard. And once he understood a little bit better about what was going on, he begged Bill's forgiveness and offered him the hospitality of his home, and then he invited him to tell Odin and Thor of his woes, pursued by demons across the galaxy in a race to save his people and all of that.
Bill was pretty adamant that the Hammer of Thor was his now, since he won it in fair combat. And Odin couldn't exactly argue with that logic. It was the way things had been done for centuries on Asgard. Bill argued that his people were in greater need of protection than Asgard, and it would be a valuable tool for him to wield in the fight to save his species.
So Thor, trying to save face, argued that the combat wasn't entirely fair because of the enchantment that his father had imposed on him that caused him to turn into Donald Blake. And then that was like, no, I would have won, Dad, had you not gotten in the way.
Knowing he was in a tough position, Odin, who had, brought Thor back to Asgard, commanded that Thor and Bill would fight to the death for the right to wield Mjolnir, without the use of weapons, however. And to this end, the Allfather cast the combatants to the fiery realm of Skartheim to do battle. This fierce contest went back and forth over the lava flows of the realm, and Bill and Thor ultimately knocked each other out, proving that they were every bit each other's match.
Beta Ray Bill's resistance to the heat of the lava, because he came from a planet that was literally in the burning galaxy, allowed him to recover more quickly and win the battle. Since this was a battle to the death, and the clump of rock that the two of them were on was floating, heading toward a fall of lava, Bill refused to let Thor die, acknowledging that Thor was the finest warrior he'd ever fought. Instead, he picked him up and saved him, carrying his unconscious foe back to Asgard.
Naturally, this pleased Odin, but he was also left with a conundrum. Bill had won his son's hammer in fair combat, and he had proven himself every bit as worthy of the enchantment, and he was demanding the hammer.
As both Bill and Thor were healing from their fight in Asgard, Odin was left with time to figure out how to deal with this problem. For his part, Thor felt disgraced in the eyes of his father and wanted to renounce his godhood and leave Asgard forever, but Odin thought that was a little dramatic and had a different idea.
To deal with this situation, Odin decided that he would have a second hammer made, so that both combatants would be able to wield one in the fight against evil. The only problem was that the dwarves were the only ones capable of making a weapon of Mjolnir's equal, and they had been slighted by the Asgardians. They offered Odin their services on one condition. He would send a female Asgardian to the realm of Nidavellir, and she would have to best their greatest champion.
Naturally, the Lady Sif answered that call on behalf of Odin, Thor, and Bill. Sif was sister to Heimdall, and considered to be the best female warrior in all of Asgard. She rode in full armor to meet the dwarfish champion Throg in combat. Throg fought hard, and his size was certainly an advantage, but he was no match for Lady Sif. The rest of the dwarves were actually grateful for the service she provided when she felled Throg, as he'd been a plague on their community, and their request was made not because of that perceived slight from Asgard, but in order to make their lives less miserable. With Throg taken care of, the dwarves were able to focus on the work of making the second hammer.
From the same dwarf star that they had made Mjolnir, they forged a new hammer called Stormbreaker, and it was bestowed upon Bill. It came with an enchantment as well, that gave him all of the powers of Thor without robbing those powers from Thor himself.
With that taken care of, Odin, from his perch on the high seat, was given a vision of Bill's people, and Surtur's demons were closing in on them again. Even with the power of Stormbreaker, Odin was not sure if Bill would be able to stand against them alone, but it was no issue. Thor and the Lady Sif volunteered to help in battle.
Using Thor's chariot, led by the enchanted goats Tooth Gnasher and Tooth Grinder, the three of them made haste to the battle, hoping to save Bill's people once and for all. Unfortunately, when they arrived, Surtur's demons had already destroyed at least one ship in the Corbinite Ark fleet.
Sif offered to remain with the Corbinite fleet and fight off those demons who had emerged from the portal that had led to their home realm, while Thor and Bill chased them to their source. Odin had told them before they left that only by destroying their source of power could they save the day. Sif was joined by Scuttlebutt, as Bill's ship had repaired itself and rejoined the fleet. Together, they led the near-endless stream of demons on a chase away from the fleet, hoping to give Thor and Bill enough time to destroy the daemonic source, but they became too overwhelmed.
Sif at this point was actually kind of sulking. She had been rebuked by both Thor and Beta Ray Bill. There was sort of a whole side thing going on with them where she had romantic feelings for each of them and neither of them reciprocated. And so she agreed in this moment that Scuttlebutt, with her on it, should self-destruct, knowing that the explosion of the ship would destroy many more demons than they'd otherwise be capable of. And of course, then her pain would also end.
While this was going on, Bill and Thor fought their way into the portal and found a source of great power. With the combined might of Mjolnir and Stormbreaker, they were able to destroy it. The demons attacking the Corbinite fleet, as well as Sif and Scuttlebutt, evaporated, and Scuttlebutt was able to stop its self-destruct sequence.
Odin held a celebration for these warriors, and all of Asgard celebrated. And as a gift to them, Odin offered an extra layer of enchantment to each of the warriors. So since Bill had been transformed into an imposing cyborg to be the champion of his people, he had to leave behind much of his natural form. Odin enchanted Stormbreaker so that Bill could resume his previous mortal form if he so chose.
Odin then also removed completely from Mjolnir the enchantment that forced Thor to take on the guise of Donald Blake. Since this was the hole in the enchantment that almost allowed him to be killed in this most recent fight with Bill, Odin thought he'd learned enough of his lesson, so both warriors were honored by these gifts.
At that point, Thor went about his business protecting Earth, and Bill resumed his place with the Corbinite fleet, but not without help. Now that he could return to a mortal form once more, he and Lady Sif were able to have a connection, and so she accompanied him to protect his people.
And that's where we're going to leave you with part one. That's sort of the start of Beta Ray Bill, but Surtur's obviously not dealt with yet.
Yeah. Do you have any listener mail for us?
I don't.
I will always offer to make it up, and you will always turn it down.
I mean, if you wanted to make up some listener mail,
Sure.
I think that might be interesting.
Dear Brian... I don't know where this is going. You should talk about where people can find you online.
People can find me online I'm on Twitter at Swankmatron. I'm on just about it. If you type in Swankmatron, every website that you can find a Swankmatron on is me. You can find me on the Full of Sith podcast alongside you. And you can find my writings across the internet at StarWars.com or Big Shiny Robot or wherever.
Cool.
And what about you?
If people want to hear more of me, one, I'm so sorry. Two, you can go to missedinhistory.com, and that is the site for my history podcast, Stuff You Missed in History Class, where you will find every episode of that show and all of our social media connections. I'm also on Twitter as @surliestgirl.
And if you want to contact us for the show, and you can go to fothentichistory.com. That's Fothentic with an X. And use the contact form and send us an email that way. And we'd love to hear from you. And you can contact us on Twitter at Fothentics. You can find us on Facebook at Fothentic History. And you can, if you'd like to drop a review anywhere you can find podcasts, whether that's iTunes or Stitcher or wherever else, we'd greatly appreciate that. And unless you've got anything else, Holly.
I do not.
Okay. Well, you never know. Until next time, and we'll get to part 2 of this exciting story.